All right, welcome back again, everybody. This is episode 3 of the series Why Did I Crash? And today we're going to look at an incident that happened again at VIR. This time turn 17, which is also known as Hog Pen. It's the last turn that leads onto the front straight there. And first of all, thanks for the feedback last week on the audio and the video quality. I think we've gotten those things worked out, made a couple of software changes. Also, huge thanks to Chuck Hawks, who's not only a great driver coach and classroom instructor, but as it turns out also is a pretty good AV guy and gave me some advice on some new hardware. So got new mics, new hardware. In fact, these mics are probably so good you might hear my dogs breathing on the floor over here. So hopefully you guys like the improvements. And as always, I want to give a big thanks out to the driver that volunteered the data. Again, it's always hard to share these things and kind of let them be publicly shown and kind of pulled apart, but that's what allows all of us to learn from the experience. And as always, let's start by taking a look at the video in full speed. Okay, so now we've seen it in full speed. Let's take a look at what happened. So I'm doing, again, slightly different charts, slightly different graphs this week. What we have here is, I actually have 3 outings loaded, but the one that you see over here in red is the only one that's active. The others are hidden. We'll get to those later. And this is the lap when we actually had the incident. And the different color lines are actually different measures in this case. So you've got up top the accelerator, brake, the black line is the heading. And then what I've done that's a little different is I've actually overlaid 3 lines on top of each other that provides similar but different data. So the orange line, which may look kind of reddish, is your lateral acceleration. The green line is the actual steering angle. And then the blue line is the calculated yaw rate, again using the heading data. So taking a look at this, let's go down. You can see on the graph really clearly where, right about here, the driver starts making a steering correction. But let's back up a little bit and take a look at what happened. You can see them coming down the hill. This is basically exiting turn 17. We're going to look at the heading data compared to some other laps here in a second, but you might notice the car is actually kind of far off to the left. And the driver's got a decent amount of steering to put in. We got 1.14 G's. And you kind of roll that forward a little bit, and the G's are fairly steady. But again, look, in fact, let me blow this up so you can see the full video. Again, look at how far to the left the car is. It's very close to the edge of the track. And what you see is, looking at the lateral G trace, we've actually see how it drops off. I actually believe this is probably actually from the car falling off the side of the track. So you've got kind of that lean of the car, the little jolt that comes with it, and that's this kind of sharp increase and then back of the lateral G's. And you can see the driver does absolutely the right thing here initially. So he actually starts to open the wheel. So we go from 47 degrees of steering angle, very quickly, back to 0, and then back to the left in this case. So, again, trying to counter steer. Clearly the driver can feel the yaw, and we're starting to see that here in the trace again. If we had a real yaw sensor, I think we'd have a much better view, much better ability to see this closer to when the driver's feeling it. But in this case, again, we're calculating it from heading data. And then you see again the lateral acceleration starting to build, and this is basically as the car is starting to turn sideways. So the car started to pivot at this point. It's pointed towards the wall. But one thing that's interesting I want to back up and notice, have you notice is, so again, right here is where this green line starts to shoot up. This is where the driver starts counter steering. And again, does the right thing initially, doesn't pop immediately off the gas. But right here, you can see we very quickly go from 76 to 0 in about half a second of throttle, or half second. We go from 76 to 0% throttle. So again, the major pivoting of the car, the yawing of the car happens with that coming off the throttle really quickly. So it's really tough to say, in retrospect, and it's, here we are looking at the data, in this case months later. It's entirely possible had the driver just breathed slightly as opposed to coming completely off the throttle, they might have been able to just ride the thing down the grass next to the straight, slow it down, and then bring it back on. But the initial reaction was absolutely correct. It's just unfortunate that when they came off the throttle, the car pivoted, and at that point, you can see the driver go to the brakes. You can just try to lock the thing up. It does look like the clutch was still out, so you still had the rear wheels trying to drive the car. So that old adage of both, in a spin, both feet in, looks like we might have missed the left foot here. But at this point, the car's pivoted to the right, and unfortunately makes it to the wall and has an impact. So, but I actually want to back up a little bit. So, this whole thing started because the driver was basically wide coming down into Hog Pen. And you can even kind of see that in the throttle trace, right? Where you're supposed to be building throttle, going back to full throttle, you could see the driver's tentative, right? They're kind of leaning off the gas a little bit. But let's take a look at some other laps and actually compare the heading data and see where did this kind of start to go wrong. So the blue lap here is the driver's, same driver's lap, same session, basically earlier in the session. And then I'm also going to add one of my laps as well. So let's zoom in right here on the heading data. So if you go back to basically leaving turn 16, this is the corner where it's got the huge curbs on the left at VIR, and I just ride right over top of them, and then you turn back to the right to go down the hill. Here the heading is pretty similar between both my lap and the driver's prior laps. However, from the lap that the incident occurred, you can see the heading's not quite right. The driver doesn't appear to have turned enough. The turn appeared to have started at the right time, but just not quite enough wheel input, and actually was a little wide way early in that sequence. And so that is a sequence of corners where you can actually, if you get it right, you can kind of hold the wheel in one set and go all the way around it. So here you've got the headings off, and it kind of carries its way all the way down the hill. And unfortunately, when you compare, this is actually the driver's prior lap and current lap, or prior lap and the lap with the incident. The car is just basically far to the left. You got to bear with me. The video actually got a little out of sync here. So unfortunately, it was a small mistake. Driver kind of ran out of room. I think a very small error in how that was handled, and unfortunately at 90 plus miles an hour, there just wasn't much room before you hit something. So yet again, we're seeing the case where when you pop off the throttle, that car is going to rotate, and unfortunately that happened here as well. So I hope you guys find that helpful. Again, thanks to the driver, and hopefully the audio quality is better, and have a good day.